Yeah, I would like to see. Yeah.
Hey, let's bring this to order, please. Excuse me. Thank you all for attending the June 1st MAB meeting. Let's start, please. Carl, call to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Flanagan.
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Here.
Mr. Harrison.
Here.
Ms. Torelli. Mr. Brunel.
Here.
Ms. Norvell.
Here.
Mr. Boyer.
Here.
Mr. Knott.
Here.
Mr. Washington.
Present.
Ms. George.
Here.
Mr. Rebholz.
Not here.
Absent. And acting chair Whitten.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So no doubt everybody's read the minutes. It's been a couple months. Obviously, we missed the May meeting. Does anybody have any issues they want to mention with respect to the minutes, or do we have a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve the minutes of April, whatever meeting it was.
Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Jimmy Harrison. Andrew?
So we're going to have the elections for both the chair and the vice chair. They require a nomination. Does anyone at the table have a nomination for the chair?
I'll nominate Steve Whitten.
I'll second.
So that will require a roll call vote. Yeah, just appointment to that.
Mr. Flanagan.
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison.
Yes.
Mr. Brunel.
Yes.
Ms. Norvell.
Yes.
Mr. Boyer.
Yes.
Mr. Knott.
Yes.
Ms. George.
Yes.
Mr. Washington.
Yes.
Mr. Rebholz. Oh, he's absent. Sorry about that. And he's the chair. Passes.
11-0. So the same process is required for the vice chair. Does anyone have a nomination for the vice chair?
I have nine.
Did I vote on this one?
Yes.
Jimmy Harrison. So.
And you have to, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
So Jimmy, have to step away from that.
So am I conducting this, Andrew, or you?
You will be.
There's no,
Okay, so go ahead.
I'm not conducting it.
So go ahead, please, with roll call.
Mr. Flanagan.
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. That's right. Mr. Brunel.
Yes.
Ms. Norvell.
Yes.
Mr. Boyer.
Yes.
Mr. Knott.
Yes.
Ms. George.
Yes.
Mr. Washington.
Yes.
And Chair Whitten.
Yes.
We have a vice chair.
So I'm assuming we could proceed. Congratulations, Jimmy. Thank you all very much. This is, we all take this very seriously, and I'm honored, but it's just pleased to be a part of all your friendship, etc. Thank you very much. We had a little slightly heavier agenda that's been narrowed down a little bit. If any of you are here for 435 Bayshore Drive, please be advised it has been pulled. We do not have a notice of when that might come back, so that is now off the agenda. Excuse me. A waterway crime and boating safety report, Sergeant O'Neill. We haven't seen you now in a couple months. You had the air show, beach party, lots of other events. How are you, and how is Fort Lauderdale?
Pretty good. The air show went well. Definitely got to do some revisions for next year as far as my side of the house is concerned. But went well. No serious issues at all for that. Memorial Day weekend, we saw obviously an uptick in boating traffic, but no serious incidents, no problems to be noted at all for that. So I think it went pretty well. So since we have a May meeting, pulled the stats for April and May, and I'm glad to say that we only had 2 burglaries in that time. One at 1200 David Boulevard, a garment was taken off a boat parked over there. There was no prints that would be pulled from the boat, but they did have a camera installed, which got footage of the suspect. There's been no update on the detective bureau as far as if they've identified the suspect or not. The other burglary took place at 4121 Northeast 34th Ave. Somebody got aboard the vessel there and took a bicycle on the vessel, and some various fishing items were taken off the dock there. There was video of the suspect and prints of the suspect on that, and they have identified the suspect, but they have yet to take him into custody. And in those 2 months, the Marine unit wrote 121 citations and responded to 7 boating accidents. One of the accidents took place in the 4000 block of North ICW. Pretty serious accident with a young man who was operating a vessel meeting his friends. He had it was a little whaler, like 70-foot whaler. He had like a homemade tower on it, like a little tuna tower on it that wasn't secured, I guess, very tightly. And he was running pretty fast. And then the bolts in that tuna tower let go and slung him forward, and he went face first into the boat, and the boat swerved and went into one of the docks there. For last update, he was recovering. It looked a lot worse on scene than what it was, but he's had some facial injuries, but I think he's going to recover pretty well. The tragedy of the whole thing was that his parents were killed in a boating accident a couple of years ago. So that's kind of the tragedy of it. But as far as he goes, I think he's recovering from it. The boat is total. But yeah, so that's what I got.
Thank you. Many of us have read about that. Thank you very much, and thank you for your service. Anybody have any questions for the sergeant on the board? How about the public? Any questions for the sergeant? Thank you again for your service. It brings us to our first dock waiver, excuse me, which is item number 6, which is 831 Solar Isle. I believe Walter Morgan is representing this, and the applicant is requesting approval for an installation of a no-profile boat lift, 2-finger piers extending a maximum distance of just under 24 feet into the adjacent Rio Corral waterway. Counselor, I'll let you explain where we are and what it is.
Happy to. Walter Morgan, I represent Mr. and Mrs. Jerry Avon and Junior, actually. I wanted to briefly address the fact that this property was first acquired by the applicant's father. And the property at one time, that when they acquired the house at 831, which is out on the intercoastal and the lot, the 25 by 25 foot, I call it an out parcel, which across the street, but directly across the street, was one of the issues, but was owned by the same seller. They had acquired it from the people that owned the property to the north, which had been a little waterfront parcel that they didn't need, I guess, because it was extra seawall, extra boating space. So the Mr. Mavon insisted that he would buy the property out on the intercoastal only if the one out on the canal, this 25 by 25 foot parcel, which we call parcel number 2, could get a permit for a dock. So before he even closed, they got the permit approved by the city of Fort Lauderdale building department to build a dock. And you'll note that there is a survey later in your file that shows the dock right there at the end of that 25 by 25 foot parcel. That was before it became a basin. It was so in 1969, well, between 69 when he acquired the property and the basin, he used it to have a little boat outside on the canal. And then in 2015, it was passed through a family trust and into the current applicant's name, Mr. and Mrs. Jerry Mavon Jr. So shortly after that, the 2010 was when they thought, well, this is nice that we could have this dock out here on the canal, but it would be nicer and better for the fact that the neighbors are kind of letting them use some of their property board their, dock their boat, if they cut the basin in. So they got to apply for a permit. They got the permit for the basin, and they significantly finished it, cut out all the land and built the seawall for the most part. When they got that the order came from the city to cease construction, and then the order was lifted because they wanted to finish because there was some flooding going through, because now the land had already been, the original seawall had been removed, of course, and the basin was filled with water. So after that happened, the city refused to finish the hearing that came before you all, not this same body, of course, but back in 2010, and they approved the waiver of the fact that there was no upland structure on that little 25 by 25 foot out parcel, but it was all owned as one property. And so they, this board approved the waiver, and yet the city refused to have the city commission hear the second part. And as you know, the most important part of the waiver is for the city commission to grant the waiver. So because of that, it was recommended by Mr. Dunkel, who's sitting right here, that, we have one option, refill in the basin or go into that equitable estoppel lawsuit, which was won. And the city circuit court, which is all part of the submittal here, gave a final judgment. And then we had in 2013, so some time had passed, almost 3 years. In 2013, the city commission had this hearing where they discussed the fact that they could appeal this judgment. City attorney at the time was Harry Stewart. Bob Dunkel was his assistant, and it was suggested by then Commissioner Trentalis that if the city attorney thought that it was probably going to lose an appeal and this basin was already built, there should be a unity of title, joining the two parcels as one legally joined property. It was already a combined property as far as the owner was concerned, but there is a legal difference between a recorded unity of title, which has been attached here to the affidavit that you have in your packet on page 19 from Harry Stewart, who opined that night, and he recertifies that opinion in his affidavit, that due to the circuit court making the analogy that the city was allowed to do waivers, and due to the fact that there were multiple examples of waivers that had been granted, combine that with a recorded unity of title, it would meet the ULDR requirement for an upland structure, even though it was sitting on this 25 by 25 foot basin, as opposed to where the house is. So I make, to me, the most important thing about this whole circumstances here is that the unity of title was suggested, it was approved by the city attorney's office, it was recorded, and then everybody lived fine and for 3 years until the boat that had been, the basin had been designed for, which was an inboard, and they backed it in fine. Well, that boat was sold and replaced with a outboard with outboards on the back, propellers on the back of the boat. So they got to bring it in the front ways. Plus my clients were getting a little older, and they thought, well, gee, if they put a boat lift in there, they could board and deboard the boat at the level of the dock, as opposed to, as you know, the tides go in and out significantly. So they thought, we better check with the city. So they made an appointment. All three of them that are sitting here now went to the city manager's office, and they said, listen, we had such trouble, which nobody wants to repeat anything like that. We want to do this boat lift. We want to ask if you think there would be any problem, because we recorded this unity of title just like you required. And the city manager gave him the non-legal opinion, no problem, because as long as you meet all the requirements the building department has, and they issue you a permit, you can build a boat lift, which they did. And they got the issue, and everything was permitted, everything was constructed, including the boat lift, including the piers that are there today, bigger piers. When the neighbor to the north, his neighbor, Mr. Lieberman, decided to file a lawsuit against the city. And as a result of that lawsuit, the attorney for the city, Mr. Burke, won a motion to make sure that this first goes through the Board of Adjustment avenue. They go to the Board of Adjustment, and a magnificent memorandum was submitted as part of the record, which said that the city issued the permit because it was one piece of property as far as the unity of title was concerned. It required all the setbacks and all the design requirements, and so the permit should be approved. Well, for some reason, neither the attorney for Mr. and Mrs. Mavon, nor the attorney for the city of Lauderdale, nor did the memorandum that they beautifully submitted, did it attach a copy of the recorded unity of title. So this board I was chairman of that board at one time, and I know what it's like to have a lot of people that, some of them are lawyers, some of them aren't lawyers, and they were not given the opportunity to read the unity of title that you now have the opportunity to have read. It's attached to Mr. Harry Stewart's affidavit, and it clearly, as worded by the city attorney's office, it clearly says this is a joint property. It's to be considered as one parcel with an upland principal structure, and it's for the use of berthing of vessels, vessel as closed. And so, to me, it wouldn't take a lawyer when you read the language in there to acknowledge the fact that this is one parcel of land now. Consequently, an upland, a structure on any part of the parcel qualifies it under the LDR. However, 5 out of 7 people on that Board of Adjustment that night voted it was an erroneously issued permit, and it was voided. And then there was a requirement by an injunction to not use the boat lift and make sure it was not usable. So they dismantled the boat lift and kept the boat in the basin and went on with, that's when they hired me, by the way, to try to figure out some manner in which they could get qualified under the unity of title, which was not considered by the Board of Adjustment, in order to have a permit issued to reinstall the boat lift. And that's why we're here. We're just trying to make sure that the unity of title, as confirmed by the affidavit of then City Attorney Harry Stewart, is recognized as qualifying. And he told his commissioners that night, because of that circuit court case and because of unity of title, once it's recorded, it will meet all the requirements of the LDR of having a principal structure. However, this board, who was not given the opportunity to read it, ignored it. They all acknowledged that a unity of title existed, but nobody was able to read it to them. And consequently, it was just a bad ruling. But we have the chance now to correct it. The previous city attorney and the current city attorney have both agreed that the best way to correct it is to do what we're doing tonight. Come before you, get your recommendation for the fact that it does qualify as an upland principal structure. And therefore, the requirements for a waiver are met. And, I've practiced law over 40 years, and I've never seen an example with more circumstances. Extraordinary circumstances is what's in your LDR. As long as this board finds extraordinary circumstances behind the fact that this permit should be granted. I want to point out to you, exhibit number 4, I requested the client in January of 2022, go ahead and file an application for a new permit. And I think if you'll see, the page, I call it exhibit number 4, it's on page 37 of the application. You'll see that the reason given for the fact that that permit was not approved to reinstall the lift was solely due to the fact that, once again, we cannot issue this permit because there's no principal structure based upon the Board of Adjustment ruling back in 2018. So that can be corrected tonight in part because from here, as you know, we have to go to the city commission in order for them to actually grant the waiver. But we asked you for your recommendation and approval that a waiver should be granted. I have my clients here who would be happy to answer any questions if you have one with regard to, they thought when they went and met with the city manager that they got the city's approval, put the boat lift in back in 2016, and that turned out to get reversed.
Thank you. Couple questions. First of all, I'm dying to understand how old the clients are. Thank you very much. You have a room full of them. So a couple questions. Looking at the site, I think you helped us understand, it looks like there is an existing boat lift there, but is that an abandoned boat lift?
Yes.
So it basically, it was installed, but then had to be removed?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, it was completely permitted. They went through the expense and completely installed it. And for whatever reason, the neighbor waited until that was done, even though obviously it was obvious it was going on for, I don't know how many weeks or months, but he waited then to sue the city and then went to the Board of Adjustment because Mr. Burke insisted that he couldn't proceed under the lawsuit. So once he won at the Board of Adjustment and they dismantled the boat lift, couldn't use it.
But they're allowed to still retain the boat in the notch? Is that
Oh,
correct?
yes, because that was approved back in 2010 and 12. When they built it.
And the new boat lift that is being proposed is the same lift or it's a new low profile lift? Is that correct?
It's
Same thing.
it was a low profile to begin with. I've got, I submitted pictures
Yeah.
to you that you see it in there, how high the boat is not that high of a boat. This just so happens that the height of the dock, if you have the boat lift on this have the boat on the low profile boat lift and you get it a couple inches out of the water, you can walk right onto the boat from the dock, which is boarding and unboarding, as you all probably have heard, berthing is done for the purpose of boarding and unboarding boats, vessels. And that's going to permit them at their age, as well as most of their guests are their age or older, to use the boat.
So, just one second. So I would just make a general statement. Before I decide not to be chairman on this one. It would seem to me, and I'm not speaking for anybody but myself here, because I've spent a lot of time reviewing this application, et cetera. Obviously, it's ultimately the city commissioner's decision, but it would seem to me that this board is being asked to comment on the legality of something we can't comment. We cannot comment on whether or not it is qualified as an upland structure, et cetera. If you have a combined title, that's great. My understanding is what we can comment on is the legality of what is being proposed, both the lift and the pier, and to make sure it is compliant with current code. And if it's not, then you would be asking for a waiver. The waiver you're requesting is slightly different than that. Can you qualify exactly what the waiver is?
Yes, the waiver of subsection 3, which reads that no docks or mostly docks or any moorings can be, a permit cannot be granted for anything like that unless there is a principal structure on the property that's being built. So that's why, it's obvious that there's no principal structure in that 25-foot notch, and there never was. However, there was always a dock being built back starting in 59, But once somebody brought up the legal requirement, which was brought up by the neighbor, obviously that had to be addressed. And so it was because it was addressed in the circuit court, and the circuit court found the situation here was analogous to the 13 other ones that had been submitted to them, and the city had granted a waiver to them. They said they should grant a waiver in this case. So we would rule that it should comply and for a waiver. And then Harry Stewart and then Commissioner Trentalis agreed that, well, we really need to legally combine this property. It can't just be titled together. It has to be combined as a joint property in all respects. One can't be sold without the other. And so that was required of them. They executed it. It got recorded back in 2013. And that should have been the end of that question. However, it was pointed out by Alan, the last city attorney. He said, well, Walter, he says, I want to just go straight to the commission. And he said, you may get the commissioners convinced that they should consider what they did back in that year in 13 as equivalent to a waiver, but it really wasn't a waiver because we have to go back now to the Marine Advisory Board and get them to look at it now. And so that's why we canceled. We had a hearing set for December just to go straight to the commission. We canceled that, and we're here now processing this, your recommendation for a waiver, so then we can, only then can we go back to the city commission and finish it.
Thank you. Let's talk about the board here and then see
Sure.
if we can get some additional questions, please. Anybody have a question here, discussion? Thank you very much. Eric?
Well, as I understand, the unity of title is not a question any longer. I don't see much difference from minutes of December 2010, where we approved using the slip, but without the boat lift. And the applicant today is basically requesting to refurbish or replace the boat lift, which was disassembled in order to comply with the ruling at the time, and to replace some pilings which were approved earlier. He's not going out any further with the pilings. Correct?
Correct.
I don't see where there's a big issue for us to, come to find out that I think it's pretty clear in support of documents. Our minutes from December 10, what we approved then. I would hope we would grant approval today.
Chip?
I was just gonna ask, on the boat, is there a boat there now?
Yes, it's been there. It's the one that they replaced the inboard with. So it's the model.
How long is the
It's a pursuit that's 33 feet.
And so, but there is a boat lift there now.
No. It was dismantled.
Yeah, that's what's confusing.
Yeah, but you have a 4-post lift with the beams, no cradle underneath.
That's right.
You took the cradle and the wires,
Right.
the
It's
cable. all
completely
off, right?
unusable and dismantled.
Yeah, it's just basically 4 posts now
Part of
with
it's in their
the
garage.
steel beams around it.
Okay. Why the extra dock extension from what it is now to go?
Oh,
further?
no, what
It looks
I
like.
originally submitted it to extend boat docks,
Right.
and we changed that a few weeks ago. Your current application clearly says in my letter that you received, it clearly says that we're going to, you'll see it says proposed and current, as
Yeah.
is, as the docks were built with the permit that got voided. That's how they were built. And so there was never an order entered requiring them to remove those docks, so they haven't demoed. So they would like you but we have to re-permit them because that installation, that was never inspected. So the permit was never final. But it was built according to the approved permit. Okay. It was final? Oh, before the law? Okay, I'm sorry, it even got final, but it now because they voided the permit that it got final, it has to be re-permitted and re-inspected.
Anything else from the board?
That's, that boat that's in that slip, that's the inboard that's in there, that,
No,
not the boat that's
no, no.
currently there?
No, that's the
Pursuit.
That's the
That's
outboard.
it's got two outboards, right? Yeah, that's right.
That's the outboard that's in
Yes.
there now?
Right.
What's the length of that boat?
33.
And you're
33
putting
feet.
that bow in? That, when you put it on the lift, it'll be bow in rather than the bow out.
Right, it's very shallow, obviously.
So basically, what you're looking for is an extension, 25 feet is what you're allowed. So you're,
It's,
They're not.
one of them, the north dock was built at 23 feet, 7 inches.
I know
That's
that.
gonna stay like that, not an extension. However, it's an extension from the original basin. But that was permitted in 16 and built that way and just hasn't, now we're trying to get it re-permitted so that it can stay that way. The one on the south side is only 10 feet, 8 inches.
There was a neighbor who objected or is saying that it's going to cause impairment of boats coming in and out of the canal. I don't see how that's the case. Do we
That
have
is
any
not the
further?
case because of the fact that, number one, you know, the neighbor to the south keeps a boat outside of his dock that goes out further than where this boat's gonna stick out in the back. And it doesn't go out as far as it used to when the boat was sitting out there on a dock that was parallel to the seawall. You know,
And you have no intentions, or they have no intentions of getting a larger boat that could potentially obstruct navigation?
that's correct.
You can't put too big a boat in there because the beam is very narrow.
Right.
And the current boat lift would have to be re-permitted because it's probably only a certain 1,000-pound boat lift, right, for that.
Correct, yes.
Anybody else from the board?
yeah, it's one thing, normally, as Jimmy pointed out, and we kind of looked at it, there's a boat already in the slip. And there's no problem with the boat in the slip. The only difference is you're taking the boat from putting it in the water and raising it up, which actually is environmentally better for that thing, and it actually takes the wake and stuff out. I mean, there's a boat there, and if there's no objection to the boat already being there, you're gonna keep the boat in the same location, but you're gonna lift it out of the water. That's my intention,
Just
get it,
slightly.
not extending anything. And
Literally just slightly out of the water. It's a
But
low profile boat.
I'm
There's
not
gonna-
saying that, but what I'm saying is you're not extending it any further out into the water when you're lifting the boat out of the water.
Correct.
So why don't we, I think the board has tossed around a few ideas. Let's open up to the public. Does anybody have an opposition or words in support? Please come up.
Yes.
If you don't mind, move to the table. We have speaker, microphone here. Please state your name.
Where are we standing?
Anywhere close is.
Certainly. My name is Kenneth Taylor. I live at 618 Flamingo Drive. So I am on the further north in the canal on the west side of the canal. Several of my neighbors are here as well. I've spoken to the two neighbors on either side of their lift or proposed lift. And almost everybody that I have spoken to as neighbors are vehemently opposed to this. The boat lift itself doesn't trouble me much. When all of this went up, we would have opposed it long ago, except it all went through without us being notified. Fortunately, this time, somehow it came through our Riviera Isles homeowner association, and the street captains notified us, but we only even found out on Friday. Not easy to change our schedules. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. I work in Hollywood and here at Broward. But I did because it's important. The piece that troubles me the most he describes it as a dock. It's not a dock. These are finger piers extending perpendicular from their seawall out, and their pictures conveniently don't show that. So if you go down the canal, okay, these are a true navigational hazard. You heard the officer explain about a youth that had a boating accident, and this happens. These are finger piers extending, one of them, I guess they measured it, I did not measure it, at 23.5 feet out, perpendicular to the seawall into our canal. All right, anybody that has to go back and forth in that canal is subject to that. At night, it's not lighted. Now, there are other boats there, but their beam is not 23.5 feet. That's a wide boat. Okay? And that is sticking out past their neighbor's dock. So their neighbor's dock is there, and this is sticking out past that. There's a reason, I believe, and I'm trying to be polite about this, that they're on their fourth attorney. This has been litigated. Now, maybe they found someone that knows more people, or maybe he's a better attorney. But this has been litigated, and again, I'm a doctor, not a lawyer. I've read a lot about it. And it was taken down. I believe they had a cease and desist order, and everything was supposed to be removed. The piers were supposed to be removed. So when they're saying they have a valid permit, they do not, at least in my opinion, have a valid permit. Their permit was revoked, and it was done so after extensive litigation. And it looks to me like they're trying to litigate something again that's already been litigated on, gone up to, I think they call it the District Court of the DCA, gone back and forth, and they're trying to have a whole, redo this whole other area, a whole other litigation of it. And to me, it's a monumental waste of your time and all of our time. And these are my wife, my brother, who also has a house on the street, and our neighbors. And I'd be happy to introduce all of them, and I'm sure they can speak for themselves as well. But I think it is, in my opinion, a navigational hazard. It's dangerous. Someone's going to hit this. And you're not talking about properties that are close or across the street like they would have in Idlewild, where there's a house and a dock across the street. This is a house on a point lot with water frontage on the intercoastal. I don't know how much they have. It looked to be about 100 feet. And not even adjoining, but a 25 by 25 foot parcel of land, a little square that they're putting a boat in. Now you can say, well, what's the boat there now? There's nothing, once it's approved, there's nothing to stop them from doing something else. And it's been litigated quite a bit. You know, someone's going to hit this thing, and nowhere else in this city that I have seen has someone been allowed to dig in a basin like they did that wasn't grandfathered from many years ago and put in a finger pier into the canal like a marina. Okay, I go up and down the river in my boats. My kids have boats. I'm on the water all the time, and I've never seen one. So clearly there's a reason for that. Maybe there is one, and I would stand corrected, but it's not common to come down one of our canals, okay, off of Las Olas and have a finger pier sticking out.
So just out of curiosity, but again, and some of us obviously were here in 2010 when some of this went down. So some of this is new to us. I would assure you that all of us have seen how far that finger pier goes. So the picture isn't misleading. We've all been there. We've seen it. How long has that existing finger pier been there?
I believe, I can't speak. I've only lived there since 2000.
Does anybody know the answer
And
to that?
I didn't take notes.
5 years.
5 years. So just out of curiosity, the course of 5 years, does anybody know if it's been hit or has caused any problem? I'm just curious. If anybody knows.
Don't know.
Problem. So the issue you're concerned about, or we should make sure that it's lit or well marked, but this is not new. So somebody prior to us approved that. And what we are being asked to comment on is whether or not the current request complies.
But the request was, whoever approved was revoked. I have a letter
No,
from them that it was supposed to be, not just the lift. The finger piers were supposed to be everything was supposed to be taken out.
Okay, and so just so you understand, we're going to vote on this. This ultimately, we don't approve anything. We recommend to the city commissioners. And that's important here because if the request meets current requirements and code, we can approve it. But ultimately, the city's decision as to the legality of the upland structure, et cetera, that's their issue. And we cannot comment on it, correct? Anybody else would like to say something from the public? Please feel free.
Hi.
Please come up and mention.
I'm Ken's wife, Michelle. My name's Michelle Primo Taylor. I'm a real estate lawyer. I've been practicing since 1991. I'm here on behalf of the two neighbors adjacent to the Mavens for limited representation that they strongly oppose. I'm not their lawyer, but we're working on obtaining a lawyer, and they're both out of town. And from what I understand from Mr. Lieberman is that the final order of the board adjustment regarding this case was appealed twice. And everyone has seemed to ignore it because nobody has made them remove anything. There's no code violations for non-removal. And we don't understand since 2021 why nothing's been done. So that's what I'm here to represent. We are seeking counsel and we'll be back before the commission. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Since we have Mr. Dunkel here, I'd like to ask him if he wouldn't mind answering the question with regard to, I believe it's on that 100-foot canal, you can go out 30 feet. We're going out 23. Some people say, well, you can only go out 25 feet, but we're going out 23 feet, 7 inches. Yeah, and that was all approved, that distance, when the permit was issued. And I believe there was never an order issued. Sure, you could produce one if you had one that said we had to take it out. The order issued saying that we could not use the boat lift. And in order to put the boat in there, we had to dismantle the boat lift. So there was never a written order that said you must immediately remove those finger piers. However, we know that they're not under a valid permit because it got voided, but it was valid. It was approvable when it was approved. And we think it would be approved again based upon how it's built. Bob, isn't that true about 30%?
Bob Dunkel, Assistant City Attorney. Number one, a vessel can be berthed up to 30% of the width of the canal.
Right.
As Walter said. Number two, I'd like to point out that the finger piers at 23 feet,
7 inches.
23.7 feet are permitted as a matter of right. You can go up 25 feet. They're not really part of this package where you're seeking a recommendation from the board. All you're seeking is a recommendation from the board that the waiver for the lack of a principal structure has been satisfied by the unity of title, which was never entered into evidence in circuit court.
It was a mistake by all three of the lawyers that were involved. But luckily it wasn't me.
I'm Bruce Taylor, also from 712 Flamingo. And I think there's some confusion, and I actually had a significant question. You're talking about being able to go out 30 feet or up to 30 feet. They're already talking about the length of the boat itself is now going to,
It has been for more than 5 years. It's been 30.
but now you're talking about a new different boat.
No.
What's
that is
the length of,
the
what's the
original-
length of the boat that's going to go on there now?
The same one that's there.
I don't know, that doesn't answer the question. You just said, I asked, what's the length of the boat? And you said the same one that's there now,
33 feet.
33 feet. So sticking out 33 feet from that.
It's within 25 feet inside.
25 from that.
It's basin cut inside the land. So the first 25 feet
And the-
are inside the seawall. And then the other 8 feet are sticking out. I think.
What's the length of the width of the canal in the area?
100
feet.
100 feet?
Yes.
So actually, at 100 feet, the 3 feet you would be extending into the 30-foot thing. It's not 33 feet, it's 30 feet.
No, we're not extending.
Yeah,
3 feet.
20
Oh, you're back into the,
First 25 feet are inside the property line
okay.
and the seawall. So it does stick out. It doesn't stick out as much as our neighbor's boat.
No, that's what I was saying is because the 33 feet, if it was from the property line or actually from the west
question,
face
that
of
would
the
be a
seawall.
And they never approved the permit in.
Let's bring it back to the board, so we hopefully can all get home in a reasonable time tonight. Any other questions from the board or discussions, et cetera?
Yeah.
Is it, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, my take on this is that this is really out of our purview. We're being asked to approve a waiver for a something about legal with the title and, whether or not if there's a structure on the building, that's land. That's not the water, part of it.
Upland.
There's obviously not a house, that it's attached to. I think that the question really is for the commission. I don't think that it's really for us tonight. I'm not really in, if, as Norbert was bringing up, if you're allowed to put a boat there, I think you should be able to put a boat there. That's pretty much universal, around the city. But that's not what we're being asked. We're not being asked, is the boat okay there? Is the boat lift okay there? Or the size of the boat lift okay there? We're being asked, should they be allowed to have a boat lift there because they own property in a certain way? I don't think that's part of what this board is all about. I think we should kick this to the commission. I don't think we should really recommend yay or nay on it, but more of
So that was my initial thought, is that again, we're being asked to pass judgment on legal issues that are clearly beyond the scope of, at least I believe, our authority. But then if the applicant is requesting approval for installation of a no-profile boat lift and two finger piers, extending a maximum of 23.7 feet. As a board, we don't have a problem with that, or we do have a problem?
Is that what we're being asked?
That,
or
that
are
part of
we-
it, that part of it doesn't require your judgment at all.
Yeah,
What does require your judgment is whether the lack of a principal upland structure is an issue.
right.
And that's
Not being asked about the boat.
We can't answer that.
They
can't
don't
answer
need
that.
our permission. for the
You
boat
already
lift.
did. No, back in 2010.
2000, yeah.
That's right.
And Mr. Philbrook put a thing there at the end of the motion saying, okay, for the waiver as to the lack of the principal structure, but no boat lift. So that's what you're back here before. Well, again, you already approved the lack of the principal structure. A waiver for that.
But it wasn't stamped by the commission, so that approval is no longer
No,
in place.
well, yeah, well, if you remember, I advised you that you would have to come back here
Right.
on that last aspect.
So upon the assumption that the city commissioners feel that this complies and can deal with the union title, et cetera, we are being asked to pass judgment as to whether or not the applicant should be allowed to install a low-profile boat lift in the location.
You're being asked to recommend or not a waiver as to the lack of the principal structure. If evidence has been presented showing extraordinary circumstances, then you would approve. If not showing extraordinary circumstances, then you would deny.
So if the city commissioners, again, will confirm the legality of this, then we can approve the boat lift, subject to them, again, confirming the legality.
Well, that's putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah,
In
they're
order to
already
get to the city commission, you've got to come through the Green Advisory Board for either approval or denial.
But whether
Steve,
we
is it-
qualify for.
Steve,
it
it seems to recognize the
Yeah.
unity of title has been granted. It's
Yeah, it has been
acknowledged. We approved it back in 2010. but
So-
no vote.
Okay, no, I understand that, but I don't, again, this is being presented to this board who's new. You know, we all read it,
Right.
but again, there are situations that are brand new to us, so I'm simply want to make sure we're on the same page. Does anybody have? Go ahead.
But
Is
if
it,
we've
is the
already
piers been
approved,
permitted?
Pardon?
The piers that they're in question is, have they been permitted or were they just put in?
Were they to be removed when the?
No, there was never an order to remove them. It
No,
is
but was
true- it is
permit
true.
issued to put them in?
We have to get them re-permitted to keep them.
Oh, that's what I'm saying
Yeah.
is, so they theoretically, they're not a permitted piers that the boat is in.
Yeah,
As of
they
right
were
now.
once permitted because they approved all the regulations.
I know, so the
They met.
possibility that they could have to remove the piers
That's right.
and then reapply to have piers put in before you would do that. That's what
Well,
I'm saying.
when
There's a
it-
legal thing.
Removing them is not a prerequisite for reapplication, which is what we're in now. We reapplied. And we got denied in January 22, for the sole reason that we had no upland structure in the basin based upon the BOA. That was the only reason it got denied. It's in one of your pages there. And you can see the application was denied for that reason. So my point, though, you are right in that if we come out of this, that qualifies us to go to the city commission. If the city commission finds that we don't get the waiver, then we have no right to keep. They can ask that or demand that we remove those piers.
Well, I think what you should need to do before you come here for the boat lift, number one, I said I would think that you would have to go before the city commission, number one, or permitting and stuff over there. And first of all, get two piers, legal, documented that the pier is okay, or have them removed and new piers put in.
Well, and the city has taken the position that if we qualify for the waiver and for the new permit, there's no reason to go to that expense of tearing it out and putting them back. The only thing that the waiver is only based upon whether or not the unity of title confirms what Harry Stewart, the city attorney, has defined in his affidavit, causes this property to meet the ULDR requirement of an upland structure because there is a house on the joined property.
Looks like,
Always has
looks like what we're doing is you want us to approve the boat lift prior to the piers.
Do
Then
not
you'll go
approve it.
back and-
Only the city commission, and the building department can approve the boat lift. If you have to recommend whether or not we qualify for the waiver based upon extraordinary circumstances. And as I said, there's so many years of extraordinary circumstances here where they were told, you got a permit, build it. Then they were told the second time by the city commission, by the city manager, just get the permit, you can build it. So they did, they spent the money to build it, and bought the boat lift and put it all in because they got a permit. Completely issued because they qualified for it. And I'm saying that, to me, that those things combined over the years meet extraordinary circumstances. And as Mr. Dunkel mentioned, sir, and I understand you're a doctor, not a lawyer, the court that denied the appeal did so because there was no unity of title in the record. And if there's not a unity of title, they have to affirm the vote of the BOA.
I will, clarification.
I'm simply saying that if you read the unity of title, which I bet you haven't had a chance to, if you read the unity of title, you'll see that it says it's not contiguous, but it is a joint parcel and it qualifies as.
Hey, guys, let's move on, please. Thank you very much, Council. So I guess the question is, we all completely understand and are completely confused. Is there a motion to approve or reject? Go ahead, Jim.
I still think that this is the wrong board for what they're being asked on this. We're being asked to, we've already acknowledged that there is a unity of title years ago. Apparently that this board has said that's okay, but we're being asked to acknowledge that that's a thing so that they can put a boat lift in. This is all about what's the definition of a house? What's the definition of property? What's the definition of what's on the upland so that they can do this? We are only in the water, and we're from the dock on out of what it is. But whether or not you're allowed to have a dock, because of the type of ownership or the type of title that you have on the house, I still don't believe that this is the correct board for this to be going.
It's not the correct word in the sense that we cannot, even when we talk about the unity of title, I don't know if that's actually correct, but I think you're correct. But we can vote on whether or not the application, we approve or reject the application for the vote that is within the prison ward.
But we don't have to. That's the thing, is that it's within, doesn't need our waiver to do that.
There is no, it doesn't require a waiver. It's what he
Well, it
It's
does.
a different type of waiver.
Okay, yeah, I'm saying it.
It obligates us to confirm the existence of it, subject to the town confirming the fact that the upland structure applies. We're not confirming the legality because it's not asking us for it. The town is simply, we want to send it up to the city commissioners that we are either in compliance with the request or rejected.
I think it's more of a code issue than it is ours.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'd be saying, we agree that if it was allowed to have a boat lift, that we would say that yes, boat lift like this could be there.
So do we have a vote on that subject to the city commission confirming the legality of the structure?
I can't imagine.
Can't imagine it.
What we're doing.
Why can't the motion be made that you're
Attorney,
acknowledging and?
Yes.
so we have the assistant city attorney here, right? Maybe can you offer some more clarification, because I'm confused as hell.
If you pose a specific question, I'll respond to it. That was a little bit too broad brush.
What I'm hearing is that we are not wanting to vote because of legalities of who owns the dock, who owns the property, how it's written in the law to where you can put a boat lift if there is, or a dock, if there's no structure attached to it. You can't just throw one out somewhere. You told him, right? This is your opinion that he needs to come in between or come before us first,
That is correct.
before the city
Because
commission.
in 2010, you approved a waiver as to the lack of a principal structure, but that was done before there was a unity of title.
Right.
So
Now, we have
your
unity of
recommendation
title.
is to have
If
us
we
vote
read
on
the
it.
Unity of title, it fits squarely within the definition of a development site. Also, it's combined, on the property appraiser's records, it's all combined.
I
as
see
one
that already,
site,
yeah. So your recommendation is to have us vote to the city commission on whether we,
Thumbs up, thumbs down,
if,
yeah.
if no unity of title was an issue at all, whether we would permit this boat lift to be done, or we recommend that this
I think
this
the
waiver
argument
is.
is strengthened by the fact that there is a unity of title.
Right.
That it tracks the words in the ULDR for a development site. And we have a provision in the ULDR that allows for a waiver of a lack of a principal structure when it comes to docks. You can have a waiver as to how far out the dock can go. You can have waiver as to how far mooring piles can go. And also thrown in that basket is a principal structure. So in my opinion, you have enough before you to be able to vote this up or down. And all you're doing by voting it up would be saying, yeah, we're okay with it.
We're okay with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Did that answer your question, or do you have more?
Confused as hell, I know was kind of broad brushed, but yes, that answers my question. Thank you.
So, anybody else have any other questions? So again, in reading, and thank you, Bob, it appears as if, again, reading the application, the applicant's summary description indicates a proposed boat lift, et cetera, are designed for the safe mooring in the owner's vessel. So these are the extraordinary circumstances. The legality and the upland and all that, we're all, again, way above our pay grade. But I do believe we can vote as to whether the structure that's been proposed, the applicant's application is, again, we approve or reject, subject to city commission for we have.
I think that our well, the waiver we would be motion we would be making would be that we agree that this property should be allowed to have a boat lift.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
I would suggest the motion should be, we recommend approval of the waiver as to the lack of principal structure, and we would include the boat lift to be permitted, whereas under Hilbert's motion back in 2010, it wasn't allowed.
Yeah, I think we need to say as we originally approved in 2010.
But again, I don't know what circumstance,
Yeah.
this is 13 years later. I don't have any idea what happened.
I'm not attaching myself to that.
What we approved then is, had
But
nothing to
but
do with
so
who
many
the
things-
people were that were here.
But so many
There's-
things have changed.
yeah.
If somebody comes in front of this board and asks for this boat lift and the pier that complies with current code on a 100-foot wide canal, do we approve that? Correct?
We don't have to.
But we do, we have to acknowledge, that's the waiver request, and it goes up to the city that we acknowledge the fact that this does not comply.
It does comply.
That's compliant.
No, if it had, if the upland structure, if the title.
That's the unity
That's
of
the only
title,
thing.
brought that together. I think the unity of title, you need to push it aside. You've had the city attorney twice now saying unity of title has been granted.
Going away.
It's going away.
We can only rely on him because we are not lawyers.
Yeah.
He is the person that represents us in the city commission.
What we
To help that.
once before.
Does anybody have a motion? Anybody have a wording on this motion we could put in front of the board?
I don't know, just one thing though, I mean, I am changing my mind as far as with the, yes, we could approve
Yeah.
that boat lift would be allowed in this property. That's legal to be there, so, but I don't know how to word that as far as a motion, but you know, there's a boat there now, the boat's legal to be there. There should be allowed to be a boat lift there as well. If the property is legal to have.
Let's listen to Council, please.
Based on what you said, I believe I would recommend the motion approving the waiver as to the lack of a principal structure and permitting a boat lift, since it wasn't permitted back in 2010. And then vote that up or down.
Get all that down.
Waiver as to the lack of a physical structure and permitting a boat lift,
Some physical principle.
Principal upland structure.
principal and what?
Upland. Principal upland. You need
Yes.
to lay it.
The board had to approve that.
Would somebody like to make
I'll
a
make
motion?
that motion.
Motion to Barry Flanagan makes a motion, so be
I
second.
second.
Tyler,
Yeah, I second.
take a roll call vote, please.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Torelli,
Yes.
Mr. Brunel,
Yes.
Ms. Norvell,
No,
Mr. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Knott,
yes.
Ms. George,
No,
Mr. Washington,
No.
Mr. Repol, oh, he's out.
Oh, you're right here.
Oh,
I abstain because this is my second meeting. I've been to. That's maybe.
You're not allowed to abstain. You have to vote for your abstention.
I have to vote.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't understand the issues. Sorry.
I understand what you're saying.
How
I
can
didn't
he
write the
not,
statute.
how can he not abstain? I don't understand. What if there was a conflict of interest? Would he be able to?
If there's a conflict of interest, yes, that is grounds for abstaining. Absent a conflict of interest, you must vote.
But you have to fill
Do you
out
have
a
a
form in
conflict of
order to have a
interest?
conflict of interest.
Look, I mean no disrespect to anybody, Ed, I mean no disrespect to you, it's incumbent on everybody to know what's going on here, so you're required to vote.
Yes.
Thank you.
Chair Whitman.
Yes.
And Mr. Flanagan.
Yes.
It passes
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
9 yeas and 1, 2, 3.
9-4, free again. Thank you very much.
It'll
The
be.
next order of business is a,
That was a long one.
that
That was a long one.
Gary Flanagan, and,
I mean, if you look
at the
neighbor south, then that's sort of they have jet skis that are sitting out.
That was-
As far as that. They have 4 jet skis that are sitting out. Like they're.
I'm just uncomfortable with, I just, you know,
Break your thumbs.
I don't know about the finger piers,
Listen to these attorneys.
but I can't, I don't feel comfortable relying on 10 and 12 and 13-year-olds.
This on, I'm sorry. Our next order of business is, excuse me, dock waiver number 9. No, I'm sorry. Oh, no, dock waiver number 7, which is 321 North Birch Road, and I believe that is Jenna from Tyler Chappelle's group, if you'd be kind enough.
As well as Stephen Tillman.
And Stephen Tilbrook, I'm sorry, Steve.
All right. Jenna's gonna hand out our PowerPoint presentation and we're gonna try and make this brief. So I appreciate first of all, I appreciate your service. I enjoyed serving with you 10 years ago. These things don't ever go away.
So it's your fault.
Yes. Don't leave it on me. I'll accept full blame. That's why, it's like,
Ah,
get paid
perfect.
big bucks. And why you get paid.
Where were you, 3 or 2?
I served on the board. I was not an applicant.
Thank you.
But I am a lawyer. I'm with Ackerman Law Firm, and I'm representing the applicant in this case. And the applicant in this case is our 4 slip owners at 321 North Birch Road. I have with me Ed Cape, who is the president of the association at 321 Water's Edge. I also have Tyler Chappelle and Jenna Robbins, who are the Chappelle Group. There are our applicants, and I'm just very briefly and succinctly, this application is a request to remove two permitted boat lifts and replace them with 2 floating docks. That's in simple form, the request, because these are within the confines of the existing waivers that have previously been granted. There's 2 or 3 waivers that have previously been granted for this site. So this is not extending any further than the waivers that have already been granted. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jenna to walk you through the application. But by the way, I'll say this, we also have our neighbors here. And we've been working hard with our neighbors at the Cormona Apartments, and they submitted today a letter of no objection. We talked about removing one of the piers that really wasn't serving a floating dock, and it's that pier is in your application, and Jenna is going to point it out to you, and we do not object to removing that pier from the application. So We've worked with our neighbors. We're confident that we're gonna be good neighbors. There's a history between our neighbor and the developer, and we're committed to making it better. So thank you for your time. I'm gonna jump back up when it's time to answer any questions. And Jenna, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening, board. My name is Jenna Robbins. I'm with the Chappelle Group. I'm here to present this dock waiver application on behalf of 4 slip owners that consist of Robert and Lisa Verdon, Robert and Mary Berard, Brenda Lapointe, and Lee and Patty Engler. The project site is located at 321 North Birch Road. The site is located along the Intercoastal Waterway. Slide. It's just west of A1A and North Birch Road along the Intercoastal Waterway. And then I'm going to show some aerial photographs from different angles to give you an idea of the existing structures of the property. There's currently a marginal concrete dock, a 200 linear foot seawall. There's 2 finger piers that are wood that are 20 feet long and about 4 feet wide. And then from this angle, it's hard to see, but from this angle, it's better from the north or from the south facing north. You can see that there's 10 single mooring piles and then 3 triple pile clusters, and they extend a maximum of 75 feet from the property line. And then there's also a no profile boat lift located at the property as well. And then you can see this one, you can't really see the structures. And then the next aerial should be from the east facing.
Yeah,
You're very quiet.
Okay, sorry. All right, next slide. And here's a aerial, just a bird's eye view of the property. You can see the existing finger piers that extend about 25 feet from the property line. They are to code. The boat lift extends about 57 or 55 feet from the property line. And then the mooring piles extend a maximum of 75 feet from the property line. And here's our plan set showing these structures as well as the distances. So there's 4 slips at the property with the 4 foot wide marginal dock and the 4 foot wide finger piers. Those are fixed. There's a boat lift in slip number 2 that extends 55 feet from the property line, and a resolution was granted for that in 2021. There's also a boat lift was also granted a resolution in 2021 in slip number 4 to extend a maximum of 51 feet from the property line. And then all of the mooring piles and the triple pile clusters that extend a maximum of 75 feet from the property line were permitted in 2014 and granted a resolution as well. And so the applicant today is asking for a waiver to remove those existing fixed finger piers and install 2 floating docks that are about 50 feet long and 8 feet wide. Just because the existing finger piers pose a safety hazard. And they would like to remove those boat lifts as well and utilize the floating dock to moor their vessels. And as Mr. Tilbrook mentioned, there's a 20-foot long finger pier shown on the north side. On the right side is slip number 1, which was proposed as a fixed finger pier, but we are willing to remove that from the application. And here are some photos of what the site currently looks like. There's the concrete marginal dock. In between those 2 boats on the top left, there's a fixed finger pier, and then that top boat is located on top of a no profile lift. And then at the bottom right, that's just another angle from the south side of the property. And then here's a few more angles. You can see that the water level between the marginal dock, or the distance between the marginal dock and the water level, is pretty steep. So a few incidents have occurred, which I'll get into. And then here's another angle from the water showing how high this marginal dock and finger piers are from the water at low tide. And then this is the view of the property from the north neighbor, and you can see the mooring piles and the boat lift, as well as the finger piers.
Here's the same exhibits, just overlaid on top of an aerial. These are the existing conditions with the 2 boat lifts, finger piers, and mooring piles. And then the 2 floating docks are shown in green. The proposed concrete fixed dock is shown in orange that we're willing to remove from the application. So we would just are requesting a waiver for the 2 floating docks to extend a maximum of 57 feet from the property line. And as you can see, it's located on the intercoastal waterway. That's about 562 feet wide here. So we're well within the 25% width of the waterway. And here's just a cross-sectional view of the proposed structure showing the length of the existing finger pier at the top and then the proposed floating dock on the bottom, and they're not extending past the existing mooring piles at the property. Here's just a summary of what was originally permitted back in 2014 and 2021 for the 3 triple pile clusters, the 10 single mooring pile clusters, and the boat lifts. That range 51 to 75 feet from the property line. And then we're requesting a variance for 2 floating docks to extend 57 feet from the property line. We're requesting this variance or waiver because all of the structures will not exceed 25% the width of the waterway. The waterway or the intercoastal is about 500 plus feet in this location, so it will not impede navigation. The floating docks are necessary to safely moor the residents' vessels, especially during high wind events, severe weather, and especially excessive wakes experienced along the intercoastal there. The floating docks are also concrete wave attenuating breakwater docks to help with the excessive wakes experienced. And the 4 slip owners would prefer a floating dock as opposed to their no profile lifts and the finger piers, as there's been a few incidences where people have gotten hurt. They fell off the dock, and between the dock and the boat, 3 people were hospitalized, resulting in broken bones and stitches, and somebody knocked unconscious. And then these floating docks are consistent with the other structures that were previously authorized at the property and will not extend more than 57 feet from the property line. Multiple residences within the building itself have provided letters of support, and then as well as the neighbors to the south. And then there's also existing waivers in the vicinity. Those are just the letters of support. And then, as I mentioned before, it's consistent with the waivers previously issued at the property. And then there's a few just south of the property as well that have been issued before. And then I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So we're here to answer any questions that they come up. We would accept a motion for approval with the condition of removal of the north finger pier. And we're here to answer any questions. Thank you for your consideration and support. Thank you for your service.
Board, any questions, any discussion?
I have no problem with the proposal at all, but I did have one question. The building's only been there since 2020, so I'm curious about the 2014 approval of the 75 foot.
This is one of those projects that took several years to implement because of litigation with the neighbors. So the permits that were granted were in place while the litigation went on. Once the litigation was resolved, the permits were granted and the principal project was constructed. That's why some of the approvals were before the building was actually completed.
Thank you.
But the public, any comments from the public? Jenna mentioned a number of letters supporting. Do we have any objections? Andrew? Not first. Yes, please.
Can I address that, please?
Please come up and speak. Take your name, please.
Sure. Just to make sure we all understand what's happening. So my name is Tim Galagowski, and I'm the Vice President of Pomona Apartments, Inc., which is a 7-unit co-op located just north of this the 321 property. And as Steve mentioned, the applicants are agreeable to removing the finger dock, which is part of their application. And that is the result, conversations that our co-op board has had with Steve and with our neighbors over the past couple of weeks. It really speaks to kind of the crazy geography that we have there. And I just like to give you a sense for why we're working so hard with them, because we really are very appreciative of their safety concerns. And I think that they're appreciative as well of our concerns that have to do with sort of the unique geography here. So, so what happens here, it's on the first page, see what happens is that just north of the 321 property, the waterway takes a pretty big bend there. It's at a 45-degree angle. And so the result of that is that is really shown on the second page, which is what this looks like from the Pomona Apartments property. So we are right on top of this. This is not like the waterway is nice and straight. We're not looking right into it, because we're looking right into it. And that over the years has caused a lot of controversy between our property and the developers next door. But we're appreciative of their safety concerns. There's no question these docks are way out of the water. And it's unfortunate what's happening there. The application is submitted on the third page, indicates where the finger pier is located. And that's the finger pier that Mr. Chilbrook and the applicants are agreeable to removing as part of their application. And we're good with that. And so we are prepared to not oppose this application as long as that is the case going forward. So as approved by this one.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Andrew, we can approve this subject to removal of that finger pier.
Yeah. I'll just need a new site, a new plan prior to submission.
Anybody else have a question, discussion? Barry?
I think it should be noted the distance to the channel is considerable, but I don't know the exact note, so we're well allowed to vote.
Any further questions? Would somebody like to make a motion?
Motion to approve with the condition that the finger pier.
Jimmy Harrison approves, subject to removal of the finger pier.
Second.
The north finger pier. Elizabeth George seconds. Let the roll call vote, please.
Mr. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Torelli,
Yes.
Mr. Brunel,
Yeah.
Ms. Norvell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Knott,
Yes.
Ms. George.
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
Mr. Revolts,
Yes.
Chair Witten.
Yes.
It passes.
That is, those are passed by. Well, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Squeaks by.
Okay, next one, with me, next one is item number 9, which is 909-10 Northeast 20th Avenue, which I also believe is being presented by the Chappelle Group. In this case, the applicant is requesting approval for the installation of 1 dock extension and 4 mooring piles. And I'll let, who's up? You say your name and says.
Hi, my name is Catherine Moyer with the Chappelle Group, and I will be presenting on behalf of FMB Waterfront LLC at 900-910 Northeast 20th Avenue.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
All right, so in this first aerial photograph, you can see that the property is outlined in red and is located south of Federal Highway and Sunrise Boulevard. In this first, in this slide, it is the northern portion of the property facing south. It contains a seawall, dock configuration, and mooring tiles. This is another angle, the southern portion of the property facing north. An aerial view of the property facing east. And an aerial view of the property facing west. So as you can see that the slips are perpendicular to the seawall, which is common in this area, as you can see in the adjacent properties. Right. And again, this is just another aerial. The property is outlined in red, and there is a 61-foot seawall with a dock configuration, including that smaller portion and a finger pier, along with 3 mooring tiles. In these proposed conditions, you can see that the finger pier is going to be extended by 33.6 feet. And 4 mooring tiles will be installed. As you can see, they are lettered there. And then this is our cross section. The top is the existing conditions, and the bottom is the proposed, showing that extension of the finger pier. And then again, this is the same layout. We just put it on top of an aerial so you can see what's there and the adjacent neighbors. So again, we have our seawall and dock configuration, which is to remain, and the current mooring piles will be removed. In the proposed conditions, we show in green the extension of that finger pier, along with the location of the 4 slips and 4 mooring piles. And then this is just a little further away. As you can see, the waterway is 275 feet of width from wet face to wet face. And with the extension, we are requesting 68.7 feet from the property line. So like I said before, the dock extension will be 68.7 feet from the property line, and the mooring piles will range from 3.3 feet to 42.9 feet, as the waiver will request. So all of these structures will not exceed 25% width of the waterway, and due to the 275-foot width, no impediments to navigation will occur with the proposed structure within the Middle River. And these structures are necessary for vessels to moor safely, especially during high wind events and severe weather. The proposed structures are also necessary to protect the vessels from high wave energy from excessive boat wakes along the Middle River. And then the applicant has also acquired some letters of support. So from the adjacent neighbors to the north and the south, along with an additional ones from the surrounding property. And then this area has a lot of existing waivers that have been approved. So that ranges anywhere from about 40 feet to 125. What we are requesting at the maximum is 68.7. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Board. If you have any thoughts, questions?
Yeah, I guess just that I want to confirm that the building to the south of where you're proposing, they gave a letter of recommendation or support.
That's exactly my question.
Is that-
I mean. Shocking.
That is surprising.
Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
Wouldn't insure it.
Barry?
Sergeant, that's idle speed, isn't it?
Yes, sir, in there.
So to some extent, and again, we understand there are boats moored there, the extraordinary circumstances, we understand weather, et cetera, despite the fact that the sergeant said that they actually no wake zone, but it is exposed. Board, anybody? Public, anybody, any questions, any thoughts? Sure. Let's bring it back to the board. Do we have a motion to approve or reject? Anybody would like to make a motion?
I'd like a motion to approve.
Ed Rep holds to approve. Any second that?
Second.
Who's that? I'm sorry. This person. Take a vote, please. Roll call vote.
Mr. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Ms. Torelli,
Yes.
Mr. Brunel,
Yes.
Ms. Norville,
Yes.
Mr. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Knott.
Yes, I second.
I'm sorry, yes.
Ms. George,
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Yes.
and Mr. Reed,
Yes.
and Chair Whitten
Yes,
passes.
thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment that this area long ago was basically determined to be a place where you could moor boats, net style, perpendicular to the seawall, and it's the middle river, not the new river. It has a fixed bridge that's near it. There's not commercial activity up above it. It's a commercial area. It's a good area for what the use that it's being put to. So things like this are the appropriate place for it. This is basically what we're trying to keep away from happening to New River. New River's not the same as what this is. There's a place for this, it's there.
Thank you for sharing. You know, this is one of the attorneys previously was talking about what took place 13 years ago. Doesn't mean anything. So having earned information from somebody with your experience is very helpful. Next, the 435 Bay Shore again was pulled. So that's not on it. Our last waiver is 515 Seabreeze Boulevard, which I believe is also being presented by the Chappelle, by Kathy, the Chappelle.
You guys are busy.
So, as you're passing, this is actually quite interesting, guys. So the applicants are requesting approval for enhancement of an existing marina, including the installation of 651 feet of concrete marginal dock, et cetera. I'm going to let them explain this because I think it's an interesting concept that frankly keeps us very competitive with other communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Tyler Chappelle, the Chappelle Groups, to touch on that subject. This property surrounds, there's two docks. There's a north, we call it the North Dock and South Dock, which basically extends adjacent to the peninsula of the Hall of Fame, Swimming Hall of Fame. Some of you may recall that we're on the board. We had come before you for this North Dock when West Breck Marinas was looking to redo the floating, and they had fixed docks there, and they removed the fixed docks and put floating docks in, which some of the slips perpendicular to the intercoastal, and put in some Bellingham docks on that north side. Even then, and those docks on the north, why is it so far? It seems like the distances are that way is because they're measured from the eastern property and then going towards the intercoastal. So it's not measured from the peninsula, which is the city's property. These are the parcels that but the City International Swimming Hall of Fame. So even though it looks like it's a very large distance, it's not when it's in relationship to to the peninsula itself. So I just wanted to let you know that, and this south dock renovation is in the same situation where, for whatever reason, in the year past, it was never granted a resolution for it used to be the old RJ's Landing. And they never received a resolution back then. So we're here for you tonight for the renovation of those docks. And therefore, in need of we heard for this. Turn it over to Catherine.
Thank you, Tyler. So like Tyler said, my name is Catherine Moyer. I am with the Chappelle Group, and we're presenting on behalf of the Hall of Fame, SMI West Trek Incorporated at 515 Seabreeze Boulevard. This first aerial, like Tyler was mentioning, the property is outlined in red. It's not the property to the north. So our measurements will be based off of that small polygon. And then here is another aerial. It's the eastern portion of the property facing west. The western portion of the property facing east. The aerial view of the property facing north. And the aerial view of the property facing south. So just to note that, again, that outlined property in red is what we are going to be focusing on. And the existing structures in that area include a seawall, dock configuration that includes multiple finger piers and mooring piles. The proposed structures, the seawall will remain, but the mooring piles will be removed. And then they are proposing to construct a concrete seawall that also has concrete dock that has 13 concrete finger piers and 25 boat lifts. This is the cross-section view of what is existing at the top and what is proposed at the bottom, showing one of those finger piers. And then this is the same plan set that we had in the previous ones. The orange is to remain, but again, we're only focusing on the southern portion, which is outlined in blue. And then in green is what is being proposed. So that includes the dock configuration, 13 finger piers, and 25 boat lifts. And this is just slightly zoomed out. So since that's so small, the width of the waterway in this area is over 1,000 feet. And what we are proposing at the furthest point is 580. So these are all the waivers that we are requesting. Starting with A1 is the concrete dock, and then the B's are the finger piers, and the C's are the boat lifts. So due to the circumstances in this area, since it is such a great distance from wet face to wet face, it is 1,000 feet. This will not impede navigation within the New River Sound. And as Tyler touched on, it's more of a replacement for what's already there in the area. It just enhances what the marina can do. In addition, this will provide safe mooring for vessels, especially during high wind events and severe weather. And this is also necessary due to the high wave energy from excessive boat weights along the New River Sound and intercoastal waterway. So these are some of the existing waivers in the area. Please note that at 435 Seabreeze Boulevard, they were granted a waiver for 659 feet. We are only requesting 580. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions?
Go ahead, please.
So I do. I mean, can you go back to that picture right there? So I happen to live right in Ottawa. So my question is, and you have a great aspect or a great footage from wet face to wet face, and I see why you picked that. But my concern is the Bahia Mar. I mean, how close are you guys to that? And what I see the graphs and the numbers there, but what's the distance between the old piers. That's what I'm trying to figure out,
Right.
what that footage is
Yes.
from what's there, Tyler, to what you're asking for in each slip space.
The distance that we're going out this way in relationship to what's there now.
I'm not worried about that.
It's not the same, but this way, north to south is also not any greater than, we're actually less, because we're taking the mooring piles out that were there previously as part of the bigger piers and putting in the boat lifts, with the understanding too, that the operator of this is the operator of this. So they're the ones proposing to put in these structures and they operate these structures.
Okay,
So it's the same person and they are obviously pushing for having these boat lifts and docks there, knowing that that design will not impede their navigation of anybody coming in and out of it.
okay, because
This is much more higher revenue.
right,
Yes.
right, and neither one I get revenue from, but I am just concerned about the safety overall. And what, I guess when I saw the green overlaying the purple or whatever color it was, it seemed like the proposed was further out. If it's not, I have to take you at your word for it, because all
Yeah,
these
we can go
numbers.
Back to, do that, we certainly can go back to that point. But yeah, the intent is not to go out farther. It's to basically put them on lifts. This distance here,
Okay,
not only this distance, but you can see the boats, and these are the, it's hard to see.
no, I'm looking,
Finally, that line, this waterway, they're coming out.
okay,
So they're actually farther waterward than where the end of the piers are. They're close.
okay.
But-
It does, it's very helpful.
So you're.
And there will be some minor dredging too, to
Mhm.
help alleviate, there is some shallow areas.
Right,
We do have some seagrass issues that we need to kind of work around,
I
but
would think,
that's the intent.
right,
And the vessels here are similar in size that will be on the lifts that are in the slips now. We're looking at larger center consoles.
is there a restriction of how big the boat can be at the new structure?
That will be based on the size of the lifts that
Uh-huh.
can handle that structure.
Mhm.
The applicant has indicated to us that those vessels are 50 range, 40 to 50 range as far as the target. Versus.
I guess the new marina for all the big.
What's the weight of the lifts?
Big center consoles.
The weight is.
Yes, what the weight
probably-
was on that.
Giving me the spec on that yet, but it's probably gonna be, I mean, if it's a, little swing units or something like that, it's
Yeah.
gonna be substantial, it's probably.
35,
40,000.
40,000.
Yeah. A post. Substantial.
But so insofar as, excuse me, but so far as the board is concerned, you basically, your footprint essentially is not encroaching, is not impeding further into the waterway, et cetera, correct? Robert?
Yeah, Tyler, why wouldn't you do, like, PMR, why would you make floating docks there? I mean, it would seem.
Drive the bus.
I mean, you know.
So it's, for whatever reason, there's a market for this, and that's huge. It's huge.
Boats out of water.
Center console, no fab.
Boats out.
They want to accommodate that.
So my question is, why are you doing this? Not following, are you getting more slips? Or are they all going to?
No, they're going to be on lifts. The goal is to have
the no
vessels
on-
on lifts and to have a nicer, these are wood docks there now. They're kind of
Okay.
falling apart. And they want to go to concrete and have a nicer look and marina with.
And what happens to the little piece of property that's circled on the first?
This property is a parking lot and,
Okay, so it's
yeah,
gonna turn
there's an
into a
existing
parking.
parking lot. They've demoed the building that used to be there, the restaurant, and it's parking.
Okay.
And that will remain.
Anybody else?
Sort of tap.
That's just to speak up. I mean, it's a great idea. I really like seeing it. I hope they use Neptune boat lifts when they do it. A real advantage, of it is that the boats don't sink. They're on a boat lift, they're safer. They also get, there's no pollution from bottom paint being on the boats in the water. And the seagrass gets more light. because the boats are up out of the water. So it's all pluses. So, you know, the people who keep their boats there can sleep at night knowing they're not going to sink, you know, if it's raining. It's a great thing. So I'm happy that they're doing it, even though I don't own Neptune.
Yeah, very much agreed. You know, we're seeing this in other communities. That's why I prefaced by saying I think it's a big addition. So how about anybody from the public? Any issues, questions from the public? Yes, please. Patience.
You have your second comments from the gentleman.
Patience, will you come up to the microphone, please, to the table?
I have not received comments from Informa. However,
I didn't hear the question.
I
asked what the impacts were to the boat show.
yeah, and I have not, I know Suntex and them are talking about.
Some days.
Sometimes, but I will say that there are portions of the boat show layout that they would love to have boats. Whether or not there's an agreement between the two parties on allowing and shutting that down.
Okay. Any further questions? Any further thoughts? Bring us back to the board. Anybody have a motion?
To approve.
Second.
Motion to approve, David second.
Second.
Elizabeth George second. Bring it to a roll call.
Mr. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Chirelli,
Yes.
Mr. Brunel,
Yes.
Ms. Norvell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Knott,
Yes.
Ms. George,
Yes.
Mr. Washington,
Love it, yes.
Mr. Repold,
Yes.
and Chair Whitten.
Yes.
So we have it. All yes.
Thank you very much. So now the fun part. The item number 12 is our continued discussion on New River navigational concerns. Some update to some of you folks. Excuse me. We had a May 16th meeting with the city commissioners. Quite a few of you were there, and obviously the support was well recognized by them. After hearing us out and hearing the results of what I think was a lot of hard work from this board over at least the last year and a half or so, basically the city came back to us and said to us, essentially, we like the idea, but what we'd like you to do is go back and answer a couple of questions for us. Can I have one of those at the center? So basically what they asked us, they sent us back with 5 charges. They asked us to formulate or recommend language for them to consider a temporary moratorium. That we recommend a language that identifies the physical boundaries of the moratorium, the time period of the moratorium, including feedback from the community, and then how the city commission would handle it. What we came back with was very clear to make sure we answered specifically what we're asking. And the note that's in front of you is a kind of some thoughts that I took the liberty of putting together after hearing from the town, speaking to city commissioners, basically listening to our meetings over the last year or so. I'll read it to you and we'll open it up for communication. And ultimately, the idea is to end this meeting by sending up this formal recommendation to the town. The Marine Advisory Board is formally recommending a 1-year moratorium on the city issuing any and all waivers for docks, structures, pilings, and or boat lifts extending into the waterway beyond current code on the New River. Now, again, we were asked to consider the fact that not all of the New River may essentially be applicable. So we went so far as to talk about the areas on the New River to be included. That is the formal boundaries we are suggesting. On the easternmost side, can we put those slides up, please? Don't tell me the pictures. We'll be honest if I can say this. You can start eastern. So again, it was made clear to us that the town doesn't want the carte blanche to knock out all of the river. They want support to go into the areas that actually will be affected. So I'm not a graphic artist, but I basically drew a line. I'm gonna show you. Basically, what we did is we drew a line here. You obviously have the coastal down here. This is Foley Hammock Park. This was an area that was discussed before by town commissioners, et cetera. So what we did is we drew a line. This is called Spiro Canal, roughly marker 10 here, Nola Avenue. So we basically drew a line here and said this area here is probably okay. I don't think we necessarily need the waiver. This is all obviously subject to the city commissioner. We have just recommended. So we're suggesting we put a line right here, and from here to the west, if you don't mind, please. That we're suggesting that there be a moratorium on all waivers. No, the next slide that says west, please, the western boundaries. And the western border was a little funkier to deal with because we want to make sure we obviously took into consideration areas that might affect everybody. Which also meant that we took it's this whole picture. We want to make sure we thought about needs of every citizen. So what we did here is, here's the New River. You're all fairly familiar with it, South and North Fork, and this is where we start to get into trouble. So I drew a line. This is where the Rossola Yard is here. You obviously are familiar with this area here. This is where most of the work is being done. I drew a line right here, and you got to do some research to find the name of that canal. It's actually called Albacore Canal or Andros Lake. I think it's roughly 32nd, Southwest 32nd Avenue. So we drew a line here, the idea to make sure we don't cut off entrance to the yards here and sort of Roscioli, et cetera. The idea is we recommend to the town is to be a moratorium for 1 year while the city will put together a group, will put together a public outreach, et cetera, so we can all kind of figure out what to do next to make sure that there is not some injurious aspect that occurs because of negligence. That's pretty much it. I mean, this is the culmination of all of your efforts. So the purpose of this conversation right now is to hear what you all have to think about this and make sure we're on the same page before we set something up to the town. And with that, I open it up. Anybody?
That's good. Yeah, I'm good with it.
Recommend the land and the rest.
That's a good area that you have off over there. I said, I have to talk to both delivery people today, and we kind of almost the same area. They said the furthest boatyard to the west and that area that you were talking about from on the eastern side, that would be their main concern, stuff over there. They have other ones now, but
Just a question.
Yes, sir.
Does this meet your ask was as far as for how to, the wording?
Yes, indeed, but it's up to the discretion of the board.
No, I mean,
I'm not gonna
but
say
the,
that.
but the answer, what we put there is still, it does answer the question. Okay.
Thank you. Who else, Barry?
We had talked earlier about identifying a channel to survey. That's not in, we got something we needed in here because you have certain locations where the channel will vary distance, and that would lead into possibly direction. The other thing I will mention, Roscioli is not in the city of Fort Worth.
Roscioli is not in the city of Fort Worth?
It was Bradford. So you're stopping on the picture is correct, but your language is.
Well, I'll be honest with you, we all, in looking at it, we try to understand where the city ends, et cetera. So you don't believe that Roscioli is part of Fort Lauderdale?
The waterway is, but the land is.
Okay.
The waterway is.
So how do we deal with that aspect? Well, we can't really do a board on top of what we want.
We would be restricted to the border part of New River.
Yeah.
At that point.
The canal.
So which is all we can control.
Right.
Yeah. The river is.
And Bradford is partly in Fort Lauderdale.
Not partly, it's
The east side.
the east side of what they acquired there, but and Bradford is. It's in the, right. So
They're in the
Roscioli
three
is
cities.
Probably.
Steve?
Go ahead.
A quick question that came to mind for me, just because of all the concerns we've had and other things that have come onto this board, is what is our communication to let everybody in these areas know that this is what we're going to be doing? Because we heard from a number of the presenters today that neighbors didn't know until Friday, or they didn't know until, Monday or whatever, and about what was going on in their neighborhood. And this is clearly going to be in a lot of people's neighborhood, but we're also wanting a lot of other people to come and share their thoughts. So we want, it's more of a general question.
And I know Andrew wants to chime in,
Yeah.
but it's a cart before the horse. Because again, we're not approving this. All we're doing is recommending to the town how long the moratorium should be in the borders. And the town will then figure out how to again take it to the next step. And
Okay.
our recommendation to the town again is that we would ask that we work closely with the city commission and be involved in the planning, et cetera.
And I guess the reason I was asking was because it does say here that we're going to continue to discuss it and all of that, and we want to work, and the board is going to do that. So if I were the commission, I'd say, so board, how are you going to do that? That would be, because I know my commissioner has asked me that question.
So I think that and I certainly let other people speak as well, but the thought process behind this is the town is going to basically, we use the term take a deep breath. So the town approves a 12-month moratorium, and then hopefully we can all get to work with recommendations on possible, and there's a variety of things, but we're trying to keep it very simple at this point. At that point, we may discuss code changes versus universal code, a variety of things. And Barry's quite right that we need a Baptist, can't even pronounce that word. But we need a survey of the bottom as well, so we make sure that if we're asking a vote to get lay up on a certain area, that there's actually area for them to do.
Yeah, which is in talk of various, the points, those are all the points. And so kind of our first, that we will have, we'll have this topic as on our agenda every meeting to be talking about. So basically the workshop we're talking about can be this board, and this public workshop to talk about this, anybody coming in here talking about it. I think that for us, is to define what are the things that we're going to be talking about, the channel, how far out can a boat be? What does the 30% rule have to do with what this is? But I think it's important that we keep it limited to specifically that, to the safe navigation of the New River. It's of making this New River not turn into 20th Avenue, which is where all the boats are, there and coming out 100 feet and doing that, because that's what it does. But it's, we'll have to figure our way through it. But it's great that this board is taking a proactive role, doing, it's not, normally it's just the waivers, that we had come up. We're just getting overwhelmed with them. So it's like, yeah, it's a breather for us, but we do need to work on this and get it done. And if anything I've learned by being on boards in the city is that everything goes very slow, and we need to not let this go very slow. Is to keep the momentum going, and therefore to keep it as simple as we can to do it. But one thing, and patients can talk to this, is that the marine industry we started with a company of doing a 3D underwater scan, like a atmospheric scan of the New River to identify where the channels are. Because
For a specific area.
For specific areas, because the one thing is that, yeah, the channel may be 300 feet wide, or the river may be 300 feet wide. The channel may be 30 feet off of one side of that. So the idea is that, well, from each side, you can come out 30%. Well, if 30% on one side is the middle of the channel, then it's, so it's not, it can't be as universal of just, well, everything is the same. And some areas are 300 feet wide, some areas are 100 feet wide. So we may be discussing zones, that in this zone, it can be this way, in this zone, a different way. So it's, I think for our discussion will be, what first topic of discussion is what are we going to discuss, and kind of laying out the what are the items? And so we need to come up with a way to actually through Andrew, when we're not at this meeting, I think, to be communicating of, we have ideas, we got to shoot them through Andrew and then put them back out to the board. Steve can keep it all together. But anyway, yeah, this is great, Steve.
Look, that's a really important point. This is if we're all just showing up to approve waivers, I mean, that's fine. I'd like to see us do more. Jimmy Harrison, Barry, Norbert, guys have been on this for quite some time. And the new blood, Elizabeth, I mean, you guys are just, this is a terrific group. So again, we're not just approving waivers. We're trying to improve the navigation, the quality of the navigation. We're going to start talking about clean water. We're going to start to talk about a number of things as we go forward. But we have to keep it simple at this point. So first of all, the question, does anybody have any further discussion on this topic before we bring it back? Barry.
For those who are relatively new to the board, I can go back 8, 9 years when we had pictures of issues. We would send them up to the commission. We requested dredging through fine grants, were denied or they weren't followed through. We had the ability to have a retired Coast Guard officer who was in charge of over 18,000 bridges over navigable waters in the United States. He was persuaded to come ride the water taxi, and what he saw gave a report to the city, to us, to Marine Industry Association, that this was unlike anything he had ever seen, this commercial activity and what it meant to the lifeblood of the marinas up the road and the yards. I guess you say, well, it fell on deaf ears, but I hope it hasn't. This is the first time we've seen progress in this. And this guy here, we see it in our lifetime, right? And here it is, it's running, it's moving now, and the commission has accepted that we have to do something. So there's a lot of pictures we have here, but they unfortunately, they're dated where they should have had something done sooner than later.
You know, what we did is we all talked. And I stress, I've mentioned before how important communication is. I know Elizabeth was talking to Steve Glassman. I know we're all talking to our commissioners. That's what we need to do. So we're in a meeting on May 6th, 16th. It's not controversial. We're on the same team. Right. So the fact that we've got everybody aligned, again, congratulations to everybody for your hard work. So at this point, we have to send up our thoughts to the commission. I don't know if anybody had.
Open it up to the public.
Yes, I do. Please. Before we vote on this, there is somebody who would like to speak, please, to the public. Yes,
Yeah.
Please state your name.
John. My name is John Roth. Retired. I was a Caterpillar manager for South America and in Spain for 42 years. And I've been in over 40 countries on all kinds of waterways. I've piloted a lot of different kinds of boats, especially with different configurations of propulsion systems and tight quarters, especially in Europe. I don't have a license to do all that, but I test the results of the stuff that our people sold and commented heavily on this kind of stuff. For example, if we were to improve the water taxi service down in the middle of the new river, and believe me, we're not going to be building any new bridges north and south anytime in the future. But they're building a lot of apartments on the south, which is going to overload our existing bridge structures to the point where we're going to need alternative means of transportation, and people aren't going to be walking across those bridges. So like in Halifax, Nova Scotia, they have a big inlet there and lots of people on both sides. And they went to the water taxi, but their water taxi will move like a flying saucer in any direction at any time when the danger approaches, might be floating danger, boats, whatever it is. And in this narrow channel that we have here, in my own boat, you know, I've been scared so many times, especially on the weekends, of all the untrained captains that are out there, people driving as if they were thinking on 95, doing racing up and down. You need a different kind of a vessel if you were going to run a public water taxi back and forth on that. And we would need a place as to where you're going to dock the thing on both sides. And so somehow I think the commission needs to be informed that this kind of a thing should be submitted to a long-range planning process for population as to how we were going to move people north and south on the river and the likely locations where that would take place. And we would need a place to have a water taxi dock on the north and on the south. And as far as I see, we don't have any public identified place to do that right now. And I bring that up because, as I brought up with your name, the entrance from the east to the west, past our #1 water taxi station, just behind the Riverside Hotel, there's always a big black boat parked there. And you'll have great difficulty if you're in a 30-foot boat, which is what I've run. If you're close because of all the other traffic coming the other way, if a water taxi backs out of there and you've got the current pushing you and somebody doesn't make the alarm instantly and this little beep beep horn doesn't get to your ears, you're in a heap of trouble as a captain on that boat. There's so much danger on this river and this maneuverability. And so this 30% rule is absolutely immaterial to safe navigation of the boats, as we all know. And especially if you're towing, and towing big barges up and down the Mississippi, things like that. We make a lot of engines for those. And there's tremendous propeller thrusts. There's water depth problems. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration. And the last thing I want to bring up is that for this last big rainstorm we had, I've lived here 30 years, 33 years actually. And I have a very good friend who's lived here 60 years, and he's on the New River up near Little Florida. And he marks on his piling the high water mark in any storm event or any high tide. In this storm we had a couple of weeks ago, he measured 19 inches above the highest hurricane that we ever had. And I believe that was because South Florida Water Management District dumped water out of one of their canals down the New River, and we had an incoming tide. So the water's going up. So what's the flow rate coming down this New River?
So John, I don't mean to.
Yeah, I'm just saying that this really impacts what you can put sideways to the river.
Agreed. And what I'd ask you to do is please make sure you're aware of the calendar, make sure you're aware of when the city commission brings us around. Certainly join us anytime. It's extremely helpful. Right now, we're simply, again, want to send a recommendation to the town, but your thoughts are things that we will clearly take into consideration. And I assure you, every aspect of this is something that we will discuss, and I appreciate if you show up.
Yeah, and I think that external things from the county and the state, maybe, or water management district. I had a friend in Houston, two friends who lost $1 million homes. They're still fighting over the insurance because they opened the floodgates on a big reservoir like the Everglades, and the water came down this unmarked area on the maps. And they said, well, this is not a flood zone. We're not paying.
Thank you.
They're still fighting.
Thank you very much. So, yes, please. Just right by Elizabeth.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, Robert Franks, 1,600-ton master pump Oceans, been a resident here 38 years, going off and down the river numerous times. I could do it probably blindfolded. The one thing I'd like to do is have the board request someone from the Coast Guard come from Miami and discuss how they've regulated their river. I'd just like to hear what they have to say. Pros, cons, what can be applicable here. But if we can get the Coast Guard up here to see what they have to say, at least that's part of the discussion. You know, where do we need to restrict things? There's areas that I think certain areas of the river, okay, you can have a defined channel of this width, a defined channel of this width. Where are going to be holding areas, but we need to define those areas, and it would help to have the Coast Guard see what they've done and then look at each section of the river and just try to get some sort of defined channel.
So we're, again, same issue, we're getting into the weeds a little bit.
Right.
And safe to say, we know where to find you. So hopefully you'll be back and share your
Absolutely.
experience, but
Yeah.
that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
What's the name? I can't read. Okay,
So
so.
if
yes,
anybody wants a copy of the Coast Guard report that he gave us, have to get a hold of Andrew. Have him.
Yeah, and look, I think that's been discussed well, Bob. I know that Jimmy Harrison has talked about having a Coast Guard admiral.
Yeah,
The admirals?
we did just
Yeah.
do that last week. Did Duncan go on the ride? I mean, okay. Anyway, we will be doing that very shortly.
So what's the idea is again, we're not gonna reinvent the wheel. Again, we're just asking to send this up to the commission, but at that point, we're all gonna get the word out. You know, we should look at us.
Steve.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, John Kelly, owner of Bradford Marine. And first, I just want to thank all of you as a board for having taken this, Mr. Chairman, this particular issue as far as it has gone. We very much endorse what it is that you're contemplating voting on to put before the city commission, very much. Because as you all know, we've owned this now 4 years. We bought it from the prior owners' children that had put it in place in 1966, back when there was really not much up there. Everyone knows we call ourselves the yachting capital of the world, but it's not simply because of the beaches that you can be proximate to with docks. It's because of the services capabilities that Fort Lauderdale, Broward County, and the ecosystem here provides. There's two places where you can bring your boat in this area for services: up the New River or the Dania Cut. It clearly is like an artery to a heart. As it continues to get clogged, at some point, these larger vessels cannot get up to these facilities up the New River. And one of the things I just simply wanted to state is that from the Bradford Marine perspective, we're here to help in any way we can. We will absolutely be participating in future hearings, because as I look around, there aren't any of our other colleagues from the industry here. And I will say, we're guilty that we weren't at these types of hearings before, because I think at some level, there's this belief that it would be preposterous that at some point, the New River would choke off the ability to have larger vessels transit up the New River to all of these businesses that are what is a lifeblood to Broward County. What we will certainly do is ensure that all of the rest of our colleagues in this industry on the New River recognize it's very important, because we're talking about a 1-year moratorium. But if after that 1 year, we suddenly find ourselves in a position where docks are being built that prevent larger vessels from transiting up the New River, that's really problematic. And it's not just, by the way, and I would point out, it's not just coming up to our facility for services. There's rules in place that are requiring higher seawalls because of what we just experienced and so forth. I will tell you, we brought a barge up the New River because we needed to have some work done to one of our covered sheds, and it had to be done from the water. That barge had to have boats move on the New River because it couldn't come up the New River. So when we start talking about putting in seawalls, higher seawalls up and down the New River along those facilities, I don't know how it's all going to be done, because it's going to have to be done from the water. You're not going to see all of these sheet pile drivers coming into people's backyards. So there's a whole host of different reasons why this is an issue that is very important to the local economy. And we're here, we thoroughly thank you for what you've been doing all along, and we're here to help in any way we can.
Appreciate it. You know, it's your comment was if after a year, the boats start coming again, if that happens, then we didn't do our job. And then you didn't do your job and everybody else. So it's incumbent on patience with the Marine Industries Association. It's incumbent upon us. It's incumbent upon the owners, et cetera. Andrew has a mailing list. We send out public notices. Let's all make it happen.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I will quote that. I will remember the artery to a heart, because that's exactly what it is, and you can't choke that off. So thank you again.
Yeah.
So folks, any other comments? So we need to, I guess we need a motion.
Yeah.
Jimmy?
Make a motion to.
So
Send
Jimmy,
this, yeah.
Jimmy Harrison makes a motion that we send this communication up to the city commissioners as representing our thoughts, along with the idea that we would like to be involved and are available at the meetings for further discussion. Anybody second that?
Well, sorry, I'm not-
You look like a question.
Yeah, I think there's a step before that,
Whereby
it goes through our legal team prior to getting to our commission.
outside my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Which one?
I think there's a second step, which involves the city attorney's office reviewing what our recommendations are prior to their submission to the commission, based upon what was said at that workshop. You may recall at the workshop.
It was lengthy.
So we should submit it to
The city attorney,
attorney.
not necessarily Bob, but the
Yeah.
group, for their review prior to their presenting it to the commission in the form.
Detail, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I remember from the workshop.
Yes.
We're gonna make sure that the commissioners are aware of this. So whatever protocol we have to go through, it doesn't make any difference. This will land in the laps of each of the commissioners. We had a second
Send it to
from,
vote.
yeah, we will. Well, we have a motion pending, I believe. Was that motion seconded?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was a roll call, have a vote, please.
Mr. Flanagan,
Yes.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Ms. Chirelli.
She stepped out for a second.
She's gone. She left.
Just longer than a second.
Mr. Brunel,
Yes.
Ms. Norvell,
Yes.
Mr. Boyer,
Yes.
Mr. Knott,
Yes.
Ms. George.
Yes.
Mr. Washington.
Yes.
Mr. Repulse,
Yes.
and Chair, which
Yes,
everybody is yes, all yes.
congratulations. So we have a discussion on old and new business. Being sensitive to time. There's a number of questions out there. This is not an agenda item, but I sent this around. I sent you the information with respect to what's happening on Little Florida. It's obviously a hot topic. It's something no doubt the city commissioners will also take into consideration, but it's something that we want to certainly be aware of and be as proactive as possible. Jimmy, you have thoughts on this? as well?
Yeah, so thank you, Steve, for sending that out and actually going to the website and finding out where it all is. The Little Florida and which now, it's public, it's on the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, yes, the FDEP.
That's right.
Which the most obvious glaring thing is a 25-foot observation dock on the tip of Little Florida. That's the ultimate, choke thing. What I believe because the 25 feet is within the code, so in other words, it doesn't have to come before us. It doesn't have to come really before anybody. They can just do this. However, the one thing that we can do is to object, to contact the FDEP and file an objection to them, saying we're not okay with this, with that in particular of it. You're doing a seawall, it's nice, the place needs work, so in the little observation thing in the corner of it, no big deal, from that. But the observation dock, absolutely, it's an obvious glaring thing that just can't happen. It would be extremely, anyway, I think that it would be great if all of us at least, and we can, push that out as far as on what this is. And to try and get to cover it at that base. Otherwise, we don't have a say, we don't have any say.
So when you say sent all of us as individuals
Yeah,
or?
as individuals and even ask, other people to do it. And I think Andrew, we could do something, or Steve, even through Andrew, put out some kind of like email to us at least of like, here's where here's how to do this, kind of thing to file an objection. We've had things come before the board before, or that we didn't even know about, it's just like, because it went behind, the city doesn't even know about it. So there's things that could happen on the river that we have no knowledge of, and it could be because on a lot of things, they have multiple agencies that they have to go through, whether it's the Army Corps of Engineers, the environmental protection, whatever, things. And, at least we caught this one as far as knowing about it, at least. And it's much easier at this point to object to it than it is to, hey, they just built this thing, now we have to hire attorneys, whatever, to go after it. So anyway, this is, I believe, the most pressing thing we have as far as on the New River right now.
Just one moment. So Jimmy's point is, and I hate to put a spot here, but my understanding is the board cannot do anything that we have to approach that we so individually. Because I agree with you, and I think it's very important to get proactive in this. Your concept of individual board members writing the FDEP, do not, it's the word I'm looking for, do not cross communicate on it. Because that would be a sunshine law violation. I don't have a problem with you turning it over to Andrew and then have it included in the next agenda as materials, but do not cross pollinate on these letters.
What about the public? Can they also respond?
There's no reason why the public can't comment on it.
Okay, great.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
if this has already gotten into the agencies, the federal, the county, state, and I understand there's some approvals have been granted. Isn't there something the city commission can do to request if they get 3 of them already approved, what's stopping them from getting the city approval?
There is no,
There's no
right, 25 feet.
I like.
It's a permit, as long as it meets the code.
The permit could be in place.
Adopt a resolution in opposition to it and.
Well, I liken this very much to the Icon, where they had approval to put up a 29-foot or 27-foot abutment out over the river, and the city didn't know anything, or well, they didn't do anything to stop it. I guess the former city manager signed off on it before we got the Coast Guard involved in it, and they cut it back. But I see this coming down the same road. And if the city in a formal manner can respond to those agencies that we're opposed to this, I think it's stronger than us individually.
I agree.
So why don't you write a letter?
Perhaps a conversation with the mayor might get him to write a letter. I think you're probably in a little bit of time press. Tyler, have you followed this at all?
I'm just looking it up, but sorry. My suggestion real quick, and I haven't looked at it and I can look at it more, but we were just talking, you might want to broaden that to not just DEP, do Broward County and Corps, because I think I'll look at it, but because of the square footage of what they're proposing, it's actually probably exempt through DEP. Therefore, you cannot object to an exemption because technically they don't need the permission. So I would go to Broward County because Broward County, they do need a license and Army Corps, and just broaden it to not just DEP, cover your bases that way because.
Interesting.
Actually, Tyler, one of the FDEP regs that David Levin gave me had to deal with exemptions, and one of the exception to the exemption was impairment of vested navigability. So
If you have to file appeal, then OGC would have to make that determination. Sure.
Okay, I've been in conversation with Anthony Fajardo, the Assistant City Manager, and one thing that they do need is a building permit. And so he has advised the building department that when they show up for a building permit, that's time for some, just that he'll notify us on that. And I also reached out to Waterways at Coast Guard, and they have reached out to the Corps to tell them that they have concerns should this permit come across their desk. So,
Okay, good question.
so we have a couple of stop gaps in.
This is a citizen doing what he's allowed to do by code.
Right.
The business owners of that river, it will affect you. Have you guys reached out to that individual and talked to him and just said, hey, what's the reason for this? Because maybe there's something that you guys can do. Because I have a problem stomping on a code. If we have a code and we feel like we need to change it, that's different. But if we have a code that this guy's gonna build, he's about to spend money to do all this. And if we're sneaking behind his back to stop him, we're gonna end up with a boat lift that got permitted, all the money, and then he can't use it. It's affecting you guys. Maybe you guys, try to get a meeting with a person, because obviously that's a big property there, and anything he does to that level can affect you guys. Maybe there's a happy medium that you guys can come up with that is not just federally trying to rid of the situation and like hammer him right after he spent a bunch of money.
It's an interesting point, because we're talking about this little Florida and the owner of the third person, where somebody probably should be having a conversation
With him, yeah. I mean, like this, maybe he gets an invite to this next meeting. I mean, it's not like it's gonna make him do something faster. It's already in the works. It's already there. You know what I mean? Like, and maybe he is aware, but maybe he's just tired of having the big boats go around his bend. Maybe that's something it is a possibility, but maybe we should find that out and have a conversation with him.
The other thing to consider is when you talk about extraordinary circumstances on the first guy's waiver, doesn't the city have extraordinary circumstances? I see.
Absolutely.
When I lived on the water, they said, I'm sorry, you have a situation where you can't be a part of the law that we have on the waterway because of how much space that you have.
Those laws.
So we have to have reciprocity. It's an extraordinary circumstance. Our city depends on the New River, right? And we, not only for maritime, it's tourism, it's the power plant, it's the barges. I mean, so we've got a big responsibility, and it has to go both ways. The extraordinary circumstances for the one guy in his one lift has to work for the city too.
And maybe the power plant too, because that's a major issue.
Huge issue.
I mean, I know you guys are business owners, then that's a big issue.
Yeah.
But that's a power plant that runs the city. So maybe that's something that they need to get involved with it too, because
we're not going to resolve this, but I think that what I keep hearing is that if it impacts navigation, then code doesn't apply. So the town can supersede the code if they indeed deem that this is a problem. So we're not going to resolve this. I think we have to table it.
We should talk.
I don't know if that's absolutely true or not. I mean, the attorney, you're shaking your head a little bit, like that's not absolutely true. Because the guy can build it, and if it does impede, then what does the city do? Does the city have to reimburse him for what the money they spent? Do they have, what's the legalities on that afterwards? If he's following the law of the code, you know what I mean, like that we have.
Unless you're successful with full FEP and so on and so forth, he shows up for a permit, you gotta give him a permit.
Right.
We don't give him a permit, he's gonna bring it to the court, most
Absolutely.
likely prevail.
Yep.
Until the code is amended in some manner that impairment of navigation would be within our code as to docks and mooring piles and so on and so forth that are otherwise available as a matter of right.
And that could be something that during this discussion of this year-long moratorium, that we decide that in certain areas, code needs to change. And if the city commission is willing to vote on it or put it up for a thing, that is it. But this guy's already getting it in. So if it changes in a year, it's not gonna affect it.
Look, we're gonna do what we can. Jimmy's point is exactly that. There was the areas on the waterway where the 30% rule simply doesn't apply, or maybe is overly generous. So we're going to approach that. But again, we're trying to dumb it down for the presentation we have. But this is an issue. We'll put it on the agenda for next month. Let's just keep doing homework and share the information through Andrew and see what we can find out.
Yeah.
Talk to the people too.
I think they're gonna have a big, as big of an impact as a homeowner finding out that someone's trying to block him, is then it's just gonna piss him off. I mean, right?
When you talk,
But
to
it is
people,
just
the one part, it's of
That
the whole
one-
plan, it's just one thing, you know, so.
Right, but
It shouldn't be, but we'll see.
think of it in like a legitimate, why is he putting it there? There's gotta be a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That he's got other structure area that he could put it if he wanted to. There could be some underlying issue that is, maybe he's aggravated by having 200 boats come around his property and nearly hitting his seawall all the time. That could be an issue, you know what I mean?
Well, they did just recently buy the property.
2 years, well, in 2008.
Yeah.
And this has been in the works for a year, right?
Andrew?
Well, don't reach out as a group, reach out as individuals to the.
Yeah.
Don't, can't represent the board as a group unless you're in this room. So
Okay, so much on that. I think we have old new business. That was obviously some business we wanted to deal with, and we'll make sure it's on the agenda for next month and keep working on it. Anything new or old anybody else would like to bring up?
Eat game.
What?
game.
Yeah.
Since that might be a motion for. We have a motion to adjourn.
Also, motion.
Second,
Third.
Jimmy Harrison will give us that. Thank you all.